So this guy, Derek from Myth Vision, is probably one of the most popular YouTubers, and his content is all related to the figure of Jesus, of Christ, of the Gospels, and his position is very close to the mythicist position, which states that basically Jesus is an invented figure, sort of a fable. Jesus never existed, or maybe if he existed, everything that is told about him, it's total invention taken from ancient myths, from which the term mythicist and from which the name of his YouTube channel, Myth Vision. Now, this guy is super popular. He has hundreds of thousands of followers. And today he decided to interview one of the experts, one of the most important biblical scholars out there, expert in the early Christianity that supports this vision that Christianity basically came out from a total invention of the figure of Jesus Christ, which is Dr. Richard Miller. Now, I'm reading from his profile on academia.edu, and he says that Dr. Miller undertook his graduate work at Talbot School of Theology, Princeton Theological Seminary, and Yale University, and the Claremont Graduate University School of Religion, PhD. So this guy spent his whole life studying theology, Christianity, early church from the top tier university in the United States, Princeton and Yale. So he's definitely the one, if you need to interview somebody, the one that is going to be able to explain us how in the world a fable about somebody that probably never existed turned into the most followed religion in the world for the past 2000 years. Let's listen. All right, so let's listen.
What are your thoughts on this, and how do you think Christianity started?
Yes, this is the question, right? How did Christianity start?
Oh, yeah. First, I'd like to say that it's upsetting that that perspective that Jesus did not exist at all is being lampooned and being driven to the margins. Those that take that view are being pushed off of any kind of legitimate seat at the table.
Okay, so instead of answering the question, he starts complaining about what? The biblical scholar community. Whoever thinks that Jesus did not exist is marginalized. Okay, did this professor ever thought why? Maybe because it's just an outlandish claim that is impossible to defend. That if you try to defend it, you just end up ridiculing yourself. Maybe.
In terms of what the theories that are going to be taken the most seriously in the field. That to me,
Of course, because saying that Jesus did not exist, given the amount of extra biblical information about Jesus, is just laughable, not serious.
is an abuse of power. It's inappropriate.
Really, an abuse of power. Okay, so saying that something is not serious is an abuse of power. Think about physicists talking with flat earthers, right? This to me seems like a flat earther saying, oh, the fact that, you know, everybody that thinks that the earth is flat is marginalized is such an abuse of power. No, it's not an abuse of power. It's that your position is so ridiculous that, of course, everybody's going to marginalize you. They're not assaulting you, they're not abusing you, they're just showing you how ridiculous your position is.
Um, at some point, someone that's this chock full of myth and legend in their story, there's only two possible outcomes to that. Either he was whole cloth myth, in other words, all story, like this professor is telling you, or there's some kernel of something behind it but not enough there to really determine the narrative.
You see how he frames the problem already according to his own biased vision? So he says there are only two possibilities. Either it's 100% invented, or maybe there's a little bit of truth, but 90% is totally invented. And even if that's the case, that little bit of truth that is still there, historical truth that is there, is completely confused by the 90% of the invention, that it's almost impossible to determine what is true and what is not. So at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. It's all invented. There's nothing in the gospel that can be trusted. Maybe there's a third option, that the gospels are a good, reliable eyewitness account of what happened.
And so those are the two options.
No, they're not only two options.
I guess you can add a third, that that Peter Pan really did exist and did all these things, and you could end up with this kind of absurd construct that I
Oh, the third option is Peter Pan. Oh, this is very serious scholarly work.
think is popularized by some modern literalists. I think that's off the table in terms of some of the other videos that you've done with me. Okay.
Right.
So if we've only got two legitimate secular positions to take on this at this point.
So what he's trying to say here is a long story to say, among the mythicists, under the mythicist umbrella, there could be different positions. Those are hardcore go and say Jesus never existed, everything about him is 100% invented. And those like Dr. Richard Miller, they say, well, maybe there's like a 1% true, maybe a guy that was called Jesus really existed, but more than that, we cannot know. Definitely everything that is written about him in the gospel is total invention. And he's trying to argue that this position eventually come from slightly different direction, but at the end of the day, in practice, there's no difference, right? Because everything is just total fable. Okay, so not interesting. He's not answering the question of how Christianity sprang out of these fables. So let's move forward to another part of the interview where this thing becomes a little more interesting.
My perspective is
Oh, okay, what is your perspective?
that if the historical Jesus did exist,
All right. So he admits that Jesus existed. All right, that's the first step.
but he was all but irrelevant to the composition of the Gospels.
All right, so he existed, but he was irrelevant to the composition of the gospel. I wonder where he's getting this from. So the evangelist wrote stories about a random guy? Huh? Just because they were fond of him? But this guy had no relationship with what was written in the gospel? Why?
In fact, even in the way. And so that's my perspective on it, and we can unpack why and what. I
Oh yeah, I would love to see why and how.
think all of the layer cake of
Yeah, all the cake.
literary intentionality, the templating of different mimetic models, the effort to paint him within these theological kind of charged topics, and the sorts of things that they're trying to achieve.
What?
And in mythologizing him.
Mythologizing him? What? Mythologizing him? What's he talking about?
That we've got a text that is from beginning to end, a set of texts beginning to end that are chock full of legend, folk belief, myth.
Legend, folk beliefs, myth. Where is he getting this from? What are you talking about?
All the way across the board, this idea then that somewhere behind that we need to have this pilgrimage to, if we interrogate the text long enough, maybe the historical man will step forward and present himself and introduce himself. It's not going to happen.
Okay, you see how he's totally begging the question. So he started from the assumption that what's written in the gospel is a bunch of myth, fables, and inventions. And from there, he concludes that trying to find the historical Jesus in the gospel, well, it's not going to happen. He's assuming his conclusion. This is textbook example of begging the question. First, you need to demonstrate that what's written in the gospel is not a reliable account of eyewitnesses. Then you can conclude that it's not reliable. You cannot start by saying that it's a bunch of stories and then conclude that therefore they're not reliable. You're already assuming your conclusion. That's a logical fallacy.
That's not going to happen. You're never going to know what that guy was like. But all we do know is for certain from the standpoint of secular academics is he was not what the New Testament Gospels are not footage of any flesh and blood person that it actually existed in history.
Right. So he decided that what's written there has nothing to do with what the real Jesus is, and he concludes that obviously the Gospels then do not depict the real Jesus.
And so,
Can I press a little here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should press him a little bit. Yeah.
So I want to push it back on you, press you to say,
Yeah.
do you think the question is wrong-headed? Is it really something worth dying on the hill over with the two camps?
Okay, so the pressure that he wants to put goes back again to the story. Should we really be 100% mythicist or 99% mythicist? You see, we're all over half of the interview now, and the professor has not even touched 1 second on the real question: how do we explain the origin and growth of Christianity out of a fable? We're still discussing here if we should be 100% mythicist or 99% mythicist, or if there's any difference between the two positions. To be honest, this is not the topic, and I don't really care. Okay. And in fact, the conversation will go on for another probably 10 minutes revolving around this thing. It has nothing to do with the topic of the video. So I'm going to just skip over to where we start entering the real deal.
And the guess is, what do you think happened, Dr. Miller?
Yes, this is the question. What do you think it happened, Dr. Miller? How is it possible that from somebody that did not exist and somebody that wrote myths about somebody that did not exist, all of a sudden, boom, we have the most powerful, successful religion in the world that resisted for the past 2,000 years? Please, doctor, explain it to us.
That started this cult.
Oh, yeah. So,
All right, that's pretty easy, right? Let's listen because it's going to be pretty hilarious.
well, I would say that there was a charismatic figure back there at some point that had a following of some kind, not as big as John the Baptist movement, obscure by comparison. Maybe they were even cousins, as it says in there. I don't know. I think the baptizer was a real historical person. I know that maybe some of the people you have on your show would disagree with that, and I'm fine with that too. It doesn't change my life one way or the other. I think that basically you've got an apocalyptic. It seems like John Kloppenberg may be a good informing voice on this. And then you got this apocalyptic movement early on. Maybe you've got a cynic philosopher kind of layer there. He's dealing with you and some of these early constructions there. I would defer to someone like Dennis MacDonald. I would even defer to the mythicists. They're doing something important here in terms of trying to their heuristic project is how far can we explain this without presuming that there was a historical figure behind it all. And we're shocked at how far they can go with that, and some of that has been deeply insightful. And so, I would say that there was some sort of an apocalyptic figure there that was that there was some sort of, he upset some people in that. He was a radical in some ways, and he got executed, and he had followers.
What? You understood why, right? You understood why Christianity is brought out of pretty much legends, right? I mean, he explained it clearly, right? Okay, let's try to summarize what he said. He said that maybe there was some kind of apocalyptic movement, and Jesus was part of this apocalyptic movement, apocalyptic preacher. He maybe had some followers, maybe not, maybe less than John the Baptist. And John the Baptist, by the way, was real, but maybe he was not real, but who cares? And in any case, Jesus has some followers. And, if you put there a little bit of cynic philosophy on top, layer cynic philosophy on top of him, and, he upset somebody, they kill him, and yeah, he had followers. Yeah, that's how Christianity originated. Are you serious? This is a Princeton, Yale professor that is explaining the origin of Christianity, and this is the way he does it. This is beyond embarrassing. This is something that not even my 6 year old girl would come up with, to be honest. She would probably come up with something more credible than this. This is literally embarrassing. It's laughable. It's something that should embarrass him and all the people that we give credit to this type of guy and all the people that kind of agree with this type of guy. The fact that these guys, these hyper skeptic guys, that push their agenda that either Jesus never existed or everything that's ever been said or written about Jesus is pure mythology. If this is their representative, if this is one of their most intelligent and respected representative, and this is the best evidence that they can provide to support their position, well, let me tell you something. Thanks for this, because this solidifies my belief that you just have no argument.